And today I want to go through and do a review of Aceitceit and Aceitceit. So that way, if you're ever not sure how to proceed with your body paragraphs or your standalone short constructed responses, you can refer back to this slideshow and this video. So let's get started. All right, Aceitceit review. So we'll start off and we'll go through each of the letters and what they mean. A, assertion. C, context. E, evidence. I, interpretation. And T, tieback. So let's go ahead and talk about assertions. Assertions are basically the topic sentence to your body paragraphs or the first sentence of a standalone paragraph or a short constructed response. Now, what's unique about them at the high school level is that they need to meet certain guidelines to be college level. And so that's why we use assertions instead of standalone topic sentences. Now, an assertion is a subclaim of your thesis statement or a larger claim for an argumentative essay, and it is really a small component. So it's one reason why you believe what you do about your essay topic, but it has to relate directly to your claim or your thesis topic. If it doesn't, then you're not doing your job of being a writer that can fully explain and defend your viewpoints. Now, when you craft your assertion, you want to make sure that it is in the same format as your thesis statement or your claim. So that means that it needs to be defensible and precise, and it needs to be nuanced if you want to exceeds expectations on the rubric. Now, there are two types of essays that you'll come into contact with a lot. One is argumentative, and then the other is like an expository, informative literary analysis. When you write an argumentative paper, your assertions and even your thesis statements would have a counterclaim, and we would call that a claim instead of a thesis. If you are doing an expository or informative analysis, then you're going to have a standard thesis and a standard assertion, which does not include a counterclaim. So for this video, I'm going to be working with the writing prompt. Do you agree that cats should be allowed in schools as emotional support animals? So you'll notice right off that that is argumentative, and so I'll be showing you a counterclaim. But if it was informative, we wouldn't argue for or against. But in this case, I'm definitely arguing that they should be allowed. So let's take a look at what an assertion would look like. This is an assertion for an argumentative. While studies show that dogs make great emotional support animals to help students dealing with stress, emerging evidence is beginning to show that cats make better emotional support animals due to their calm demeanor. Therefore, more schools should allow cats in their building to help high-needs students dealing with stress and trauma. So clearly, my thesis or claim for my full paper that's in my introduction is going to have something related to this in it, and this is just one reason why I believe what I do. So now, if we think about the rubric, you'll notice that to get exceeds on the rubric, you need an insightful claim that is compelling and also nuanced. You can't just have a standard assertion or a standard thesis statement. It really has to get deep. And if it's a argumentative essay, then you also want to make sure that you include a counterclaim. Now, with the rubric, the wording's a little different on an informative essay or an expository essay. So if you want to see that, click on this within the slideshow and it'll take you to the informative rubric so you can see how the wording is different. And don't forget that the counterclaim only applies to argumentative essays and not to informative or expository literary essays. So again, this is all about fine-tuning your body paragraphs and making them stand out. What's important to remember is that assertions are the first sentence of any and all body paragraphs or standalone short constructed responses. So if you don't have an assertion as that first sentence, then you're not doing your job. So after the assertion comes the context. This is the part that most students forget about when they're writing their essays. This is the part that gives background information to your reader about the text that you have read for your essay. So you want to provide a short summary of what is happening in the text at the time of your evidence. So who, what, when, where. And a great point would be to check out your evidence tracker if you have one. So let's take a look at what that might look like. In the article, Cats Shown to Decrease Aggression in Students, the author Katie Keene shares the results of a 2-year study on how cats affect students in schools. She interviewed and observed students' interactions with dogs as well as cats, and what she found was that dogs caused students' energy to be elevated while cats calmed student behavior. So as you can see, I just did a quick little summary of what the article was about so my reader would know where my evidence came from and what the deal is with my evidence. So then after the context, this is where you would start moving into the command of evidence part of the rubric. And context, evidence, and interpretation is all part of that rubric. So you want to have leading, clear, sufficient background. That's the context for your body paragraphs. So now, next up is your evidence. And there are really 2 ways that you can approach evidence. This is the actual quote piece. And I know a lot of students like to summarize or paraphrase what authors say. But if you want to really make your writing strong, you need to quote the material word for word to a degree. But there's a couple different ways you can do that. The first way is to just flat out be like, according to the text, and then list the quote. 76% of students became calmer while interacting with the cats, and then cite it depending on what type of citing format you're using. For us, it's MLA. So this is that format. Another way you could approach it is to actually do what's called embedding the evidence right into your own wording. This is where you get the opportunity to start paraphrasing and then also adding pieces of the text within the paraphrase. So, for instance, she interviewed and observed students' interactions with dogs as well as cats, and what she found was that dogs cause students' energy to be elevated, while 76% of students became calmer while interacting with the cats. And then again, you're going to cite it just the same way using the proper formatting that's required of you. So that's how you embed it into what you're saying. And again, this goes along with the command of evidence part of the rubric, and you want to use a variety of evidence that is relevant, but it's nuanced. It's not literal. You want to think outside the box when it comes to evidence. Where can you actually make inferences and go between the information to put it all together and make sense of it, in order to do what's next, which is the interpretation piece. So now with interpretation, you have to explain your quote, but it's more than just explaining. You're not just like being like, so this shows that cats are better than dogs. No, that's not enough. You have to actually explain why it's important or why it matters and what are the consequences. There should be a cause and effect relationship between the evidence and the interpretation. So you're really like digging deep to figure out what the evidence is saying. So here's an example. This clearly shows that cats had a positive impact on the students during the day, which is significant because most people think that dogs are the only animals that have a positive effect on the emotions of children and teenagers. Now, while this is a decent interpretation, it is only 1 sentence long. And when we look at the rubric, we see that we really want to compellingly connect the evidence with our ideas in our interpretations. This particular assertion doesn't quite do that. I feel like I could have gone deeper and maybe put in another sentence or 2 about the long-term effects of this on the students. Now, after you get through writing your interpretation, you need to tie everything together and tie your evidence and interpretation back to the larger point of your essay, which is your thesis statement or your claim, as well as your assertion for your body paragraph. So you're tying it all together, connecting the pieces. So therefore, it is clear that cats would be a healthy addition to a school's therapy program and should be included in the day-to-day lives of students. So clearly my thesis or claim should say something about school's therapy program. That could also be listed in my assertion, but this has to tie back directly. And once again, this is part of the command of evidence, part of the rubric. This goes with the writing interpretations that compellingly connects piece of the rubric. Now, what you may notice is that I've only talked about one piece of evidence, which is Aceitceit. So if you are using one piece of evidence, you just do Aceitceit. But if you are doing two pieces of evidence, then there's an additional step. For paragraphs that include at least two pieces of evidence, and this is what you all want to push yourself towards, you need to include a second C, E, and I. So a second context, evidence, and interpretation. And it's important to know that you do that before the tieback. The tieback should be the last sentence of your body paragraph or your standalone short constructed responses. So don't forget that piece. I know some students are always like, but there's a T in the middle, Aceitceit, see it. Well, yes, you could look at that like a transition statement between one piece of evidence and the next. So don't feel like that's a hard and fast rule that you need a tie back in the middle, because you don't, because you're not ready to tie it all back together. So if we look at the way Aceitceit works, you're going to have your assertion, then you'll have one piece of context, a piece of evidence, an interpretation, and then again, here we go, see right here, we go back to the context, the evidence, and the interpretation for a second piece of evidence. It can come from the same evidence source, the same text, or it could be a completely different piece of evidence. It's up to you. And then finally, after that second interpretation, you go ahead and tie it all together with that tie back that connects your assertion, your larger thesis or claim, and all of that. So just a couple reminders about writing your body paragraphs. Remember, if it is an argumentative, you would have to address the counterclaim at some point. If it is an informational, expository, literary analysis, then you don't need a counterclaim. You're just going to write the most nuanced, best body paragraphs that you can. So I hope you found this video useful, and I hope that you'll utilize it whenever you're stuck on writing Aceitceit or Aceitceit, and I look forward to seeing you all later. Good luck and